fire fades and awaits its one last lord. Prince Lothric is in your hands. Please save his soul. Prince Lothric is in your hands. Please save his soul. Tell him what he must be, a lord.
Hello and welcome everyone to French Bread's Dark Souls 3 Lorerun. We just did battle with Yhorm, Lord of Cinder, ruler of the Profaned capital, and we had our old buddy Onion Bro come in one last time to help us. Unfortunately, Sigurd died in an incredibly short amount of time. Like, I've played through the game, I think I said about 3 times. 2 of those times, my second and third plays, I was savvy enough to have Sigurd along with me. And both of those times, he pretty much Tarkused that fight, which is to say, he kind of effortlessly tanked it, and in one of them, he nearly ran away with the win all by himself. So going into that, I was almost positive that there would be no issues, and I didn't rush to the sword as quickly as I usually would, but I wasn't really moving slow either. But apparently, I don't know, luck was against me, and Sigurd got stamped into mush almost immediately, which is extraordinarily frustrating. But don't you worry. I will reach this point in the game with one of my support characters, and I will make damn sure that Sigurd survives and we get his final parting dialogue. Do apologize for that. It's an exceptional thing. I've never seen that happen before.
It seems I am in your debt once again. My thanks. I could have not kept my promise without you. Now, for a final toast. To your valor, and my old friend Yhorm. Long may the sun shine! Well, I'm going to have myself a little nap. The only thing to do, really, after a nice toast. You are a true friend. Best of luck with your duty.
So, we have quite a... just a huge amount. Quite a bit is an understatement. We got a huge amount of stuff we need to start talking about. With regards to all the things the Profane Capital and the boss we just did battle with. But before that, let me dynamically on the fly switch us to our new fashion. The Crown of Wolnir, the Fire Witch set, Silver Knight Shield, and Gargoyle Flamehammer. Seemed only appropriate that as we part-time pyromancer that we are stepped out of the Profaned Capital, that we would harness a little bit of that Profaned Flame for ourselves and take it forward into what is to be one of the last areas of the game. Not the last, but certainly we're starting to get close now. So I'm going to address the immediate situation, and then afterwards we're going to do our requisite item and lore roundup for the last area. Soon as I move these nuisances out of my way. So yeah, once we had defeated Yhorm, and really it's basically as soon as you defeat 3 Lords of Cinder, you can probably beat Yhorm first, and then go beat Aldrich if that's the order you choose to play in. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it because it seems like a lot of NPC quests are kind of key to you progressing in the way I did in this lore run. But once you defeat 3 Lords of Cinder, High Priestess Emma of Lothric, head of the priestess arm of the 3 Pillars of Rule, summons us back to the High Wall, where we find her basically on the verge of death, assaulted by an unknown entity or persons, and she quickly expires after imploring us to save Lothric's soul by convincing him to become a lord, and gives us a key item called the Basin of Vows. So let's check out that basin first, and then we'll go from there. Basin of Vows. Chalice used in old ceremony in which Lothric knights take their vows. It is only a formality now, but it remains an empty practice. Place this basin at a statue of a beheading knight. So we got a lot of bad grammar in that sentence. Chalice used in a old ceremony, or an old ceremony, and it's only a formality now, but it remains an empty practice, which I guess formality is an empty practice in many senses of the word, but So in between episodes I did a little farming of those white jailer looking enemies, got their weapon. So I think we're just going to do a very standard item roundup, and then we're going to try and link the pieces together, or I'm going to try and link the pieces together as best I can. So let us start with the soul of Yhorm the Giant. Yhorm is the descendant of an ancient conqueror, but was asked by the very people once subjugated to lead them, serving both as a weighty blade and a stone-hard shield. So obviously, when you first check out Yhorm in the opening of the game, he looks for all the world like one of the faceless or whole-faced giants from Dark Souls 2. But as we saw at the end of the last episode, Yhorm actually has a very human-esque face. It's just hidden within that chain cowl, which, you know, mimics the appearance of a Dark Souls 2 giant. Based on that, I'm kind of willing to bet that Yhorm may be the product of mixed blood, I guess. Like maybe he intermingled with humans or gods, or rather the ancient conqueror from whom he's descended to was probably a Dark Souls 2 giant, and then that mingled with humans and or gods somehow, and Yhorm was a descendant from that point. Or he's just a giant, you know. That could certainly be possible as well. He could even, if we want to get really wild and far out with our speculation, Yhorm could even be a descendant of Wolnir, since he is one of the other big-time conquerors we know about. Let's see. We also have Cinders of a Lord. Cinders of a Lord left by Yhorm the Giant. Lonely Yhorm became a Lord of Cinder to put the Profaned Flame to rest, knowing full well that those who spoke of him as Lord were quite insincere. So Yhorm became a Lord of Cinder to put the Profaned Flame to rest, either I guess to tame it or more likely to put it out. But the Profaned Flame Pyromancy states that the capital was consumed by fire after Yhorm became a Lord of Cinder. The fire, brought from the sky, is said to have incinerated naught but human flesh. And it seems to be implying that this fire was the Profaned Flame. So perhaps when Yhorm linked the fire or inherited the fire, it caused the Profaned Flame to go out of control and incinerate naught but human flesh, or he linked the good old first flame, but either his circumstances or the circumstances that the people of the Profaned Capital brought on themselves triggered the first flame to go out of control and scorch them all, perhaps scorching those who had dark within them. Because as we've seen, it's very strongly implied that the Profaned Flame is a combination of fire and dark. That's not, like, my absolute opinion on the matter. That's just kind of me free-form speculating a little bit. Because the Profaned Flame itself does remain one of the more enigmatic aspects of the lore at this point in time. You received Wrath of the Gods from what I can only assume was the Profaned Capital's court, either the Court of Sorcerers or just the court in general. Primal form of force. Creates a powerful shockwave. Wrath of the Gods is an epic tale, while force is but a woefully incomplete version of that yarn. This primal account of profound fury emits a shockwave that also inflicts damage. Not a whole lot of lore there, but Wrath of the Gods is an old favorite in the Dark Souls series. We also farmed out a Handmaid's Dagger. Dagger used by handmaids of the Profaned Capital. Each successful attack replenishes a slight amount of FP. It is said that these women took pleasure in wounding others. So, more evidence of the moral decrepitude of those who, or at least a certain population of those who dwelt in the Profaned Capital. We don't get a very good opinion of them based on what we read in the items. Similar to Londor, except without any of the caveats and kind of balances that Londor has in both the presentation of its items and its NPCs. It seems like we get a very, very negative view of all of the Profaned Capital. This was noteworthy. We also received Storm Ruler. Great sword with a broken blade, also known as the Giant Slayer, for the residual strength of storm that brings giants to their knees. Yhorm the Giant once held 2 of these, but gave one to the humans who doubted him, and left the other to a dear friend before facing his fate as a Lord of Cinder. So, the Storm Ruler is a very direct reference to a weapon in Demon Souls. It was encountered in the final area of the Shrine of Storms. It was a great sword of a different design, but basically within that area, the Storm Ruler functioned in the exact same way that it does in this game, where the strong attacks were capable of releasing huge slicing blades of wind. In Demon Souls, that ability was only available in the boss room. Outside of it, it was a middling sword that had decent knockback abilities. And in that same tradition, the Storm Ruler here is not especially useful outside of this one fight. But it was very cool to see the return of it was a very neat gimmick weapon. And I know some of my friends have expressed disappointment in the fight. They kind of were hoping for, just a hard, challenging, exciting boss battle with Yhorm, and we're a little bit disappointed that you basically get handed the fight due to the strength of the Storm Ruler. But me, I don't know. I don't need every fight in my Dark Souls game to be an extremely challenging experience, as long as it's fun. Like the Deacons, I have a lot of fun fighting Yhorm, and I think I did a decent job of making the fight itself at least look entertaining. Although it would have been much nicer if Sigurd hadn't died right away. Anyway, so Yhorm, leader of these people, of those who dwell in the Profaned Capital, he was apparently a relatively decent dude. Like, he responded to the doubts of those who ruled him and placed in their hands a weapon more than capable of destroying him. And the other he left to, of course, Sigurd, presumably with the promise that should he ever, I suppose, hollow or shirk his duty or something along those lines, that Sigurd would come and drag him back one way or the other to his throne at Firelink Shrine. Let's move right along. We also, in the room with all those hand hippos, got the Eleonora? Difficult to decide how that's pronounced, but it is a strange weapon found among malformed inhabitants of the Profaned Capital. The Profaned Flame was triggered by the curse of these women, relatives of a certain oracle, but despite their culpability, they went on living without any cares. It was triggered, and the special ability is, by the way, is called Feast Bell, which is kind of a nice, macabre thing indeed. But the language here is extremely... Well, this is basically one of the best items for getting insight into the Profaned Flame. Triggered by the curse of these women, relatives of a certain oracle. I guess there's two ways to take this. Either this weapon does not refer to any previous characters in the Dark Souls universe, in which case we simply assume that the oracle and women in question were merely inhabitants of the Profaned Capital, those who had courted the dark and courted, the curse. I think that much is relatively reasonable to assume, given what we know about the Profaned Flame's connection to the Abyss. But at the same time, this may have some connection to Dark Souls 2. Possibly a connection to one of the daughters of Manus. I know at least one daughter of Manus, Alsana, I think, the Queen to the Ivory King, was very distinctly referred to as an oracle. And perhaps her relatives, her descendants, triggered some kind of curse with the flame. Alsana was charged with basically holding back the flame of chaos. So and as a child of dark, maybe this is where that conflation of fire and dark came. But I'm not sure, because the Chaos Flame, as told in the lore of the items of Dark Souls 3, is gone. It's gone out. Demons are out of power. They're out of juice. So the Profaned Flame has to be something different. Maybe a descendant from the Chaos Flame, tainted by dark, or tainted even further than it already was. I'm not sure, but it seems as if the vile nature of the Profaned Flame is the fault of these women. I wonder if the Profaned Flame was indeed more akin to a Chaos Flame, an uncontrolled flame, and when Yhorm went to link the fire and put an end to the Profaned Flame, a curse that these women had basically planted as some sort of trap triggered, causing the destruction of the Profaned Capital and the death of its citizens. And they survived, but in a different form entirely as those hand hippos, it seems to be implying, given that we tore Eleanor from the corpse of one of them. Let's keep looking around. See if there's any other items to discuss. There is. We also, from a chest, received the Great Shield of Glory. A great shield adorned with flowing patterns, a celebration of an ancient glory. Boasts the highest ability of such shields, but with reduced stamina regeneration speed. Perhaps it is glory that begets indolence. So maybe this is some insight, and boy does it ever have higher stability. 80, wow. Perhaps the glory of this nation, it's implying, inspired the indolence that led to embracing the Profaned Flame and eventually bringing about the kingdom's own destruction. We unfortunately had to pick up the Onion set. We've already read it before, but again we've lost yet another friend as we progress. If Sigurd survives your battle, by the way, you likely get carted off by Emma, but he takes a little nap, and when you return, the other Storm Ruler and Sigurd's armor is simply lying on the ground. I don't know if in that event Sigurd has expired or if he's merely abandoned his equipment, no longer having need of it. Really no way to say for certain. I would surely like to believe he keeps on kicking, but it is Dark Souls, so it may be that, like Henri before him and many other NPCs before the both of them, that he simply, having fulfilled his purpose, chose death and or hollowing as his end. I suppose, though, having the opportunity, having the right to choose is a privilege a very, very small number of people gain the right to. Alright, but back to our item roundup. We also found the Court Sorcerer hood, and indeed the entire set. Hood worn by the Court Sorcerers of the Profaned Capital. This tall, dark headpiece suggests they may have also been oracles. There are many sorcerers who claim heirship to the great sage Big Hat Logan, and the Profaned Capital houses one of two leading schools. Alright, so there's more than one school that claims, oi, we're the real heirs of Big Hat Logan. I don't think the other one is Vinheim. I think the other one is going to be the scholars of Lothric's Grand Archives, and I say this due to their association with the Crystal Sages, who are undoubtedly very strong candidates for heirs to Logan's legacy. And there's a little bit more detail on the chest. The formal gold stitching suggests they may have also been oracles. No, it's okay, so same story here. We also received the wand, or the staff, of the court sorcerers. Catalyst used by the court sorcerers of the Profaned capital. Very powerful when wielded by an exceptionally intelligent sorcerer. The court sorcerers laid claim to the legacy of the renowned Big Hat Logan, going so far as to emulate him with copies of the staff he used. So they were really hard on about trying to convince the world that, hell yeah, we're Logan's successors. Check out this staff. It looks exactly like his staff. Ignore the fact that replica is written down the side of my staff. So they had they had this, it's kind of interesting, right? Like, okay, so the court sorcerers also implied to also have been oracles. They're preoccupied with sorcery, no doubt. But we also have these mysterious women, relatives of a certain oracle, possibly of the Profane Capital, possibly of some other Dark Souls game. Whatever the reason, these women had some connection to the Abyss, to the Dark. I assume that's the curse they're referring to at any rate, given, again, that connection between the Dark and the Profaned Flame. So, it's interesting that we have these seemingly pure sorcerers who indeed even have a copy of Logan's scroll, and yet this kingdom seems to have fallen due to its hubris and indolence in engaging with the dark and with the power of fire. Perhaps the sorcerers of the Profane Capital examined that aspect of Logan's sorceries that was similar to the dark and took it to a greater degree than the other opposing school did. Because certainly, as much as the two schools want to say, hey, we're the successors to Logan, they also, I'm sure, wanted to distinguish themselves from one another. So perhaps this dark bent, this dark leaning, might be how the court sorcerers of the Profane Capital distinguish themselves from the clearly inferior sorcerers of that punk-ass institution, the OK Archives. I don't know. Again, we've basically just read all the lore there is on the Profane Capital and the Profaned Flame. There's not too much more we're going to encounter about it, so that's, at least as the time of this recording, well before any DLC is released, this is the best we have to go on. But I do still think it's... I still think it has a lot of possibilities for interesting speculation, and once I complete this lore run, I'm going to be very excited to check out more of what the internet, I guess, the collective, is thinking about all these topics. Alright. That is our immediate item lore, but darn it, I want to check out this throne. A very interesting throne indeed. All these scholarly statue-like figures we've seen all over the place. And it's a slightly different one there. Looks a bit like the Jesus, doesn't he? Maybe it's the same. In any case, they are all propped up as if they are lifting the throne, as if Yhorm is standing or is sitting on the back of their burdens. It's an interesting design, but I kind of doubt that Yhorm himself had the idea to do it. It just doesn't strike me as in line with his character, as we're going to see Not just from the items we've already read, but from the things we can transpose from his soul. I think he came back here because he was afflicted by some degree of guilt for what happened. And I just get the impression that Yhorm is the kind of dude who would enforce his own punishment, whether or not he deserved that punishment. And I think maybe he returned to this throne so that he could be surrounded by the horrors of his decisions, you know, the end point of his decisions, and so that he could reflect on it, hopefully repent on it to some degree through vigil over the lost city. Let's check out what we can transpose.
Aha, thou art returned, and a fine day it is. Ah,
Okay. Lilith has nothing new to talk to us about, so let's get right to the business. Yhorm's Great Machete. Great machete wielded long ago by Yhorm the Giant. Yhorm once lumbered on the front lines with a great shield, but one day, in place of his shield, a left-hand notch was added to his machete, enabling the smashing technique that would become the legacy of his later years. And to follow up on that, we have Yhorm's Great Shield. Great Shield used long ago by Yhorm the Giant. Increases the user's poise. As a lord, Yhorm risked everything and fought unflinchingly as a one-man vanguard. Following the loss of the one he wished to protect, he forsook his shield. So... oh boy, so... this was an item of great importance to Yhorm. It represented, I guess, his will to defend the one he wished to protect. And when he, I suppose, failed in that duty, he left the shield behind and adopted a fully aggressive fighting style. And I wonder if there wasn't a strong anger or frustration or fury that burned within Yhorm, and that might have also had a hand in just what the devastation that followed when he inherited the fire, and perhaps also the possible guilt he felt as a result of it. As for the one that he wished to protect, there's really no concrete info on this. Could it be Sigurd? I don't think he was trying to protect Sigurd. I think they were more like battlefield bros. Was he trying to protect that certain oracle that was a relative of the women who planted a curse that triggered when he inherited the fire? Maybe. If we follow the Dark Souls 2 line and we assume that perhaps he has some relation to Alsana, maybe Alsana was a relative of Yhorm, his mother or something along those lines? That's a pretty wild speculation, but throwing it out there. I'm not a huge, to be honest, I'm not a huge fan of the Dark Souls 2 connection here. I don't feel like it's, with my level of knowledge anyway, we'll put it this way, with my level of knowledge about the lore of Dark Souls 2, which is obviously not non-existent, but it's not exhaustive. It's not nearly as strong as the handle I have on, say, Dark Souls 1 or even Demon Souls. But with what I know, I'm not entirely convinced of a Dark Souls 2 connection, but I certainly wouldn't dismiss it either. That requires 40 strength to wield properly. We're going to hold off on transposing a soul for the time being because I haven't decided on what I want to do with it. Let's return old Yhorm's ashes to its throne. Did Yhorm's head get bigger? Anyway. Sorry, buddy. Like everybody else, you probably deserve something a little better than this. By the way, I gotta tell you, I love how the Gargoyle Flamehammer is its own torch. I mean, it should be, right? But you'd be surprised how often that hasn't been the case. Similar items in the past. But Okay, that takes care of item roundup. It might also more or less take care of the time we have for this episode. I ended up talking a ton, and I think if we account for the time where I'm going to hopefully show you Sigurd's situation, if he survives, I think we've pretty much reached a wrap. So, instead of going any further, I'm going to instead thank you for joining me, and I hope you will come back for the next episode where we finally return to Lothric, and we're going to get thrust once again into another boss battle. Take it easy, everyone.